I was relaxing far from home when at 5 in the morning the alarm in my apartment went off. The security guard called, "Your daughter-in-law is here. She says she's the new owner." I just smiled and said, "Let her in. She's about to get a surprise." Eleanor Blackwell sat in her suite at the Ritz Paris watching snowflakes dance outside her window. The early morning light cast a golden glow across the antique furniture, reflecting off the crystal glass of Earl Grey tea in her hand. Her silk robe, the color of sapphires, draped elegantly around her slender frame as she absorbed the news from the phone call without so much as a raised eyebrow. David, the head of security at her Manhattan building for the past 12 years, sounded concerned. "Mrs. Blackwell, I thought you should know right away. Mrs. Victoria Blackwell is here with a real estate agent and someone claiming to be a doctor. She's insisting they need to evaluate the apartment immediately." Eleanor took another sip of her tea, savoring its bergamot notes while considering her response. 77 years of life had taught her that moments like these weren't emergencies, they were opportunities. Opportunities to reveal what people were truly made of. "David, please let them in. Record everything on the security system and make sure the hidden cameras in my study are activated." Eleanor's voice remained melodic, betraying none of the storm brewing within. "And David, don't mention we've spoken." After ending the call, Eleanor moved to the window, her reflection ghostly against the Paris skyline. The city of light spread before her, but her mind remained in Manhattan in the penthouse that had been home for 43 years. The home where she had raised her son, mourned her husband, and built a life of quiet dignity. 77 years on this earth has taught me that those who underestimate me are my greatest gifts. The words hung in the air like the morning mist over the Seine. Eleanor Blackwell hadn't always been a wealthy widow living in a $14 million penthouse on the Upper East Side. Born to middle-class parents in 1947, she had fought her way through Harvard Law School in 1968 as one of just 12 women in a class of 300. While the men around her inherited partnerships and connections, Eleanor had clawed her way to success with nothing but her brilliant mind and unshakable determination. By 30, she was already making waves at Morrison & Blackwell, where she met William, the firm's most eligible bachelor and heir to the Blackwell financial empire. What had begun as professional rivalry blossomed into respect then love. William had never wanted a trophy wife. He wanted an equal, a partner whose mind matched his own. Their wedding in 1972 had made headlines. Wall Street's power couple unites empires. Their son Robert arrived 3 years later, a beautiful boy with William's dark hair and Eleanor's thoughtful eyes. Eleanor had scaled back her work slightly during Robert's early years, but never fully stepped away from the legal world. While other society wives organized charity lunches, Eleanor was busy winning landmark cases and building a reputation as one of Wall Street's most formidable legal minds. Every morning for decades, Eleanor had maintained the same routine. She rose at 5:30 a.m., dressed in tasteful Hermès silks, applied subtle makeup, and adorned herself with the Tiffany diamond set William had given her on their 40th anniversary. She took her tea always Earl Grey on the East Terrace overlooking Central Park while reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. The penthouse, all 800 square feet of it, gleamed with museum-quality art first-edition books and antiques collected from around the world. But the true value of Eleanor Blackwell wasn't in her possessions or address. It was in her mind, a steel trap honed through 5 decades of outmaneuvering corporate raiders and hostile takeovers. The world sees a 77-year-old lady in Chanel and thinks I'm as fragile as crystal. They don't see I'm made of steel forged through 50 years of standing my ground in courtrooms and boardrooms where I was often the only woman present. She had once told this to a young female associate who was experiencing harassment at the firm. The woman had later become a federal judge. When William died 8 years ago from a sudden heart attack, many expected Eleanor to crumble. Instead, she had handled the $42 million estate with precision, continued sitting on 3 corporate boards, and maintained her position as trustee of a $380 million charitable foundation. Her investment portfolio of real estate across Manhattan quietly generated millions annually, and her art collection had tripled in value over the decades. But after William's death, something in Robert had changed. Her once ambitious, kind-hearted son had seemed to lose his way. His first marriage to Elizabeth, an art historian with whom he had Lily, had ended when Robert was 40. Then, at 41, he had met Victoria, a stunning former model, 15 years his junior, who called herself an interior designer, but whose portfolio seemed suspiciously thin. Eleanor had never voiced her concerns about Victoria. A mother's criticism only pushes a son further into a woman's arms, her own mother had warned her decades ago. So she had watched, waited, and worried as Victoria's influence over Robert grew, and his visits became less frequent, his calls more strained. 3 weeks ago, Eleanor had been checking her emails when an unfamiliar address appeared in her inbox. The subject line read simply, "Grandma, it's Lily." Eleanor's heart had leaped. She hadn't seen her granddaughter in 3 years, not since Lily's 21st birthday dinner, where Victoria had made such a scene about the vintage Cartier watch Eleanor had given the girl, a family heirloom that had belonged to Eleanor's mother. The email opened a floodgate of emotion. "Grandma, I miss you so much. Victoria has convinced Dad you don't want to see us anymore, but I don't believe it. Every time I mention your name, Dad looks like he might cry. I'm in my final year at Columbia Law now, following in your footsteps. Could we meet sometime when Victoria's at her design conference next month? I have so much to tell you." Eleanor had responded immediately, arranging to meet Lily at a small cafe near Columbia. When her granddaughter had walked in, Eleanor barely recognized her. Gone was the teenager with braces and uncertainty. In her place stood a poised young woman with Eleanor's determined chin and intelligent eyes. "Grandma, things are bad," Lily had confessed over coffee. "Victoria has Dad completely under her control. He's lost so much money gambling, and Victoria keeps threatening to leave him if he doesn't fix things. She's isolated him from everyone who cares about him, including me. I only get to see him when she's away." Eleanor had listened, her face betraying none of the heartbreak she felt. "Tell me everything," she'd said, simply reaching for her granddaughter's hand. And Lily had. Over the next 2 hours, she'd detailed how Victoria had systematically separated Robert from friends and family, how she'd encouraged his gambling habit while simultaneously shaming him for it, how she'd begun talking about Eleanor's penthouse as if it were already hers. "Last month, I overheard her on the phone telling someone that the old lady won't be in the picture much longer, and that they should start looking at care facilities in New Jersey." Lily had revealed, her voice trembling with anger. "Grandma, I think she's planning something." The memory of that conversation echoed in Eleanor's mind as she sat in her Paris hotel room. She hadn't been surprised when a week later, Robert and Victoria had appeared at her door bearing a 77th birthday gift, a 2-week Christmas trip to Paris. "Mom, you deserve to treat yourself," Robert had insisted, his eyes never quite meeting hers. "Victoria and I will keep an eye on the apartment while you're gone." Eleanor had noted how Victoria's eyes had drifted to the Monet hanging above the fireplace, mentally calculating its value. The painting, worth $3.2 million at last appraisal, was just one of several museum-quality pieces in the collection. "How thoughtful of you both," Eleanor had replied, accepting the envelope with the plane ticket one way she'd noted immediately. "I've always loved Paris at Christmas." The dinner that followed had been illuminating. Victoria had seated Eleanor at the far end of her own dining table, as if she were already a guest in what had become Victoria's home. The younger woman had directed the conversation repeatedly, referring to Eleanor in the past tense when speaking to the housekeeper. "Mrs. Blackwell always liked her lamb rare, and Mrs. Blackwell preferred the Limoges china, didn't she?" The most revealing moment had come when Victoria thought Eleanor had gone to the powder room. In reality, Eleanor had forgotten her reading glasses and had turned back toward the dining room, pausing when she heard Victoria's voice. "The old paperweight doesn't suspect a thing," Victoria had laughed softly. "She's just an afterthought now, Robert. Once we get her signature on those power of attorney documents, we can finally start living the life we deserve." Eleanor had expected Robert to defend her, to show some spine, to remember he was William Blackwell's son. Instead, there had been silence, followed by the clink of a wine glass being refilled. The pain hadn't come from Victoria's words. Eleanor had faced far worse from opponents in courtrooms and boardrooms across her long career. The pain had come from Robert's silence. The son she had carried for 9 months, nursed through childhood illnesses, supported through every triumph and failure, couldn't summon the courage to speak a word in her defense. That's the kind of pain that doesn't live in your heart. It lives in your bones. Deep and permanent. Eleanor whispered the words to herself as she returned to her seat by the window in Paris. But pain can be instructive if you let it. Instead of confronting them, Eleanor had returned to the dining room with a pleasant smile, pretending she'd heard nothing. She'd accepted their false concerns and hollow compliments. She'd raised her glass to their health as Victoria had served dessert on Eleanor's grandmother's antique silver trays that had survived the Depression, hidden beneath floorboards now held by hands that had never known true hardship. Silence isn't absence. Silence is choice, Silence is strength dressed in satin. Another lesson learned through decades of being underestimated in professional settings where men mistook her quietness for weakness. For the next 2 weeks, Eleanor had played along with their charade. She'd allowed Victoria to help her pack for Paris, noting how the younger woman inventoried each valuable item with her eyes. She'd listened to Robert's awkward explanations about why they'd purchased only a one-way ticket. "We thought you might want to extend your stay, Mom. Paris has so much to offer." A one-way ticket to Paris, a one-way ticket out of their lives, Eleanor had mused later that night alone in her bedroom. But she hadn't been idle. While Victoria was busy mentally spending Eleanor's money, Eleanor had been preparing. 3 days before her departure, Eleanor had been working late in her study when she'd heard voices in the hallway. Robert and Victoria returning early from a charity function Eleanor had declined to attend. The board meeting is on the 27th. Once she signs the power of attorney, Dr. Levin will certify she's showing signs of dementia. We'll move her into Sunset Gardens by New Year's. Victoria's voice low but clear. The penthouse should sell for at least $15 million in this market. Once we pay off your gambling debts, we'll still have plenty left for the place in the Hamptons. Eleanor had frozen her hand hovering over her desk. She'd suspected Victoria was plotting something, but hearing it confirmed sent ice through her veins. Robert's response had been weak, hesitant. "She's 77, Vic. She doesn't need a place this big anymore. Sunset Gardens is very nice, and she'll have people her own age around. It's for the best." "Of course it is, darling. Now go to bed. I need to make a few calls." Eleanor had remained motionless until Robert's footsteps faded down the hall. Then she'd heard Victoria's voice again, now in a completely different tone, sharp businesslike. "Yes, it's me. Everything's proceeding as planned. The old lady leaves for Paris on the 15th. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. She'll be declared incompetent, and Robert has power of attorney." A pause. "Don't worry about Robert. He's so desperate to keep me happy, he'll sign whatever I put in front of him. The man has the backbone of a jellyfish." A cold laugh. "No, he has no idea about Zurich. As far as he knows, we're paying off his debts and buying a place in the Hamptons. He doesn't need to know about the offshore accounts." Another pause. "Yes, the ticket is one way. If she somehow makes trouble, we can always claim she got confused and missed her return flight. At her age, who would question it?" That night, Eleanor had made 3 critical phone calls. The first to James Anderson, her oldest friend and legal partner of 40 years. The second to Richard Donovan, former FBI deputy director and longtime ally. The third to her bank-changing security protocols on all her accounts. The night before her departure, while pretending to take a sleeping pill Victoria had offered and discreetly disposing of it, Eleanor had glimpsed something that confirmed her worst fears. From her darkened bedroom doorway, she'd watched Victoria stealthily enter her study and head directly for the hidden safe behind the Monet. Victoria had removed her gloves and run her fingers along the frame, searching for the mechanism. Eleanor had stepped back into the shadows, her heart constricting. The safe contained not just jewelry and cash, but documents detailing her entire estate, including properties and investments Victoria clearly didn't know about. Most importantly, it contained the original of her will, which left the bulk of her estate to Lily and various charities with only a modest provision for Robert. "I've faced greedy CEOs and corrupt politicians throughout my career. Victoria has no idea who she's up against." Eleanor had whispered the words to herself as she retreated to her bedroom mind, already calculating her next moves. The following morning, Robert and Victoria had driven Eleanor to JFK Airport. Victoria had been unusually solicitous, handling Eleanor's passport and boarding pass, reminding her about medications as if she were a child. Robert had stood awkwardly by his eyes, continually darting to his phone. "Mom, I've programmed my number into your phone. Call if you need anything." His voice had held genuine concern, making Eleanor wonder if he truly understood what Victoria was planning. "I'll be fine, Robert." Eleanor had cupped her son's cheek, searching his eyes for the boy she'd raised. "You know I've always been able to take care of myself." For a moment, something had flickered in Robert's eyes. Doubt-guilt, a silent plea, but then Victoria had stepped between them. "The boarding call, Mother Blackwell. You don't want to miss your flight." Eleanor had embraced her son one last time, whispering in his ear, "Remember who you are, Robert. You're a Blackwell." Then she'd turned and walked through security without looking back, her Louis Vuitton carry-on rolling silently behind her. Now in Paris, Eleanor wasn't touring museums or shopping on the Champs-Élysées. Instead, she'd converted her hotel suite into a command center. James Anderson had arrived the day after she did, bringing with him a team of international attorneys and digital security experts. In 50 years of practicing law, we've put 37 fraudsters behind bars. I never thought number 38 would be my daughter-in-law. Eleanor's voice had been steady as she'd briefed the team on Victoria's plot. James, now 79, with silver hair and the same sharp blue eyes she'd admired since law school, had listened intently. Ellie, we've faced worse opponents and won. Victoria Palmer Blackwell is about to learn why you were known as the Velvet Hammer in legal circles. Eleanor had smiled at the old nickname. In her prime, opposing counsel had learned to fear her precisely because she never raised her voice, never showed anger. She simply dismantled their cases with surgical precision while maintaining perfect composure. The team had gone to work immediately digging into Victoria's past. What they'd discovered had confirmed Eleanor's suspicions, and worse. Victoria Palmer, born Veronica Palermo in Chicago, 1984, changed her name after her first divorce in 2010. James had laid out the files. She's been involved in 2 similar situations before, both involving wealthy older individuals who suddenly signed over assets before being declared incompetent. Any charges filed? Eleanor had asked, studying the photographs of Victoria's previous husbands, both older men with substantial wealth. Charges dropped in both cases. First husband died before the case went to trial, heart attack allegedly. Second case settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement. Eleanor had nodded slowly. She's escalating, from marriage to elderly men to targeting their elderly parents. And she's gotten more sophisticated. The investigation had also revealed Victoria's extensive network of accomplices, including a Dr. Levin who had lost his medical license in California but still operated on the fringes, providing falsified competency evaluations for a price. When you reach 70, the world starts looking through you as if you're made of glass, Eleanor had observed one evening as she and James walked along the Seine. They forget that glass can magnify, can burn, can reveal truth. I may be invisible to them, but I'm not without power. While Victoria was busy showing real estate agents around her penthouse, Eleanor had been freezing accounts, transferring assets, and setting legal traps that would snap shut the moment Victoria made her move. Few people knew the extent of Eleanor's wealth. Beyond the obvious penthouse and art collection, she controlled a hidden empire, a $32 million trust William had established in $5 million jewelry collection stored in a bank vault, and $22 million in Hampton properties held by shell companies. Victoria had discovered the tip of the iceberg, but had no idea what lurked beneath the surface. I didn't cry when I heard Victoria planning to put me in a nursing home. I didn't rage when I heard my son agree. Emotions are luxuries in warfare, and I am at war. Tears solve nothing strategic planning does. Eleanor had written these words in her journal on the 3rd night in Paris as the city lights twinkled below her window. On the 5th day, Eleanor had received an alert from her bank. Someone had attempted to access her reserve account containing $8.3 million. The IP address traced back to Robert's laptop. I taught my son many things, but apparently I didn't teach him that all large deposits have 2-factor authentication, Eleanor had remarked dryly to James, who had immediately strengthened the security protocols further. That same afternoon, Eleanor had received a call from Lily, who was monitoring the situation in New York while completing her final exams. "Grandma, it's worse than we thought. I managed to get into Dad's email." Lily's voice had trembled with urgency. "Victoria's been manipulating him for years. She's made him believe he's destroyed everything, that no one loves him except her, that he's not smart enough to manage his own finances. And the gambling debts, they're massive. I think Dad's seriously addicted." Eleanor had closed her eyes, absorbing this new information. "How bad is it, Lily?" "Over $2 million owed to people you don't want to owe money to. Victoria keeps telling him the only way out is to sell your apartment. She's convinced him you're showing signs of dementia, that you need professional care. She's even hired someone to pose as a doctor to certify you as incompetent." The depth of Victoria's manipulation had become clearer with each passing day. She hadn't just targeted Eleanor's assets, she had systematically broken down Robert's self-worth, isolated him from support networks, and positioned herself as his only salvation. "She's textbook Grandma." Lily had continued her law school training, evident in her analysis. "She finds vulnerable people with assets, separates them from family, creates dependence, then takes everything." Eleanor had listened, her mind calculating. "Has she threatened you, Lily?" A pause. "Not directly, but she's made it clear that if Dad ever left her, she'd make sure he never saw me again. She has information about his gambling, things that could get him in serious trouble. Eleanor's grip on the phone had tightened. Threatening her was one thing. Threatening her granddaughter crossed a line that awakened something primal in Eleanor's chest. Later that evening, Eleanor had called Lily back to establish a secure communication channel and share the growing plan. As they'd talked, Eleanor had found herself telling Lily stories from her early legal career, when female attorneys were rarities treated with disdain. I was one of 12 women in a class of 300 at Harvard Law in 1968. Every day was a battle, but I never let them see me sweat. Eleanor's voice had softened with the memory. I want to teach you something, Lily. Always know where your seat is, and if they don't offer you one, make your own table. Lily had absorbed her grandmother's words like a sponge. That's what I want, Grandma, to be like you, strong, respected, uncompromising. It comes at a cost, dear one, but it's a cost worth paying. Their conversation had been interrupted by another call, a secure line from James's investigator in New York. Mrs. Blackwell, we've intercepted something you need to see immediately. Within minutes, Eleanor's laptop had pinged with an encrypted file. The document that appeared on her screen had made her blood run cold, a detailed Blackwell asset transition plan, created by Victoria outlining every step of her scheme. It included Robert's gambling debts. Eleanor's estimated net worth significantly undervalued, Eleanor had noted with grim satisfaction, and a timeline for having Eleanor declared incompetent. Most disturbing was the mention of a contingency plan, if Eleanor proved difficult, a plan that involved certain medications that could mimic cognitive decline, or in sufficient doses, heart failure that would appear natural in a woman of her age. Lily had found this document on Victoria's private laptop and forwarded it to the investigation team. Along with it had come emails between Victoria and a Swiss banker discussing the transfer of at least $17 million to an account in Zurich, money that would disappear as soon as the penthouse sold, leaving Robert to face his creditors alone. I'm not angry at Victoria, she's just a predator doing what predators do by instinct. I'm heartbroken for Robert, but I can't save him without teaching him a lesson. Sometimes true love means letting someone face the consequences of their actions. Eleanor had shared this reflection with James as they'd finalized their strategy. The pieces had continued falling into place. Richard Donovan's FBI contacts had discovered Victoria's connection to organized crime figures who controlled high-stakes gambling operations, the same people Robert owed money to. Victoria hadn't just encouraged Robert's gambling. She'd directed him to specific venues where she had arrangements with the owners. 10 days into her Paris vacation, Eleanor had received an urgent call from Lily. Grandma, Dad just found Victoria's plane ticket to Zurich. He came to my apartment completely shattered. He said he finally sees what she's been doing, that he's been a fool, that he's destroyed everything you and Grandpa built. Eleanor had closed her eyes, absorbing the news. Is he still with you? Yes. He's sleeping on my couch. He cried for hours, Grandma. I've never seen Dad cry like that, not even when he and Mom divorced. Keep him there if you can. Don't let him confront Victoria yet. We need to time this perfectly. That same night, Robert had called his mother directly for the first time since she'd arrived in Paris. His voice had been ragged, barely recognizable. Mom, I'm so sorry. Victoria, He'd broken down, unable to form coherent sentences. Robert, Eleanor's voice had remained steady, a lighthouse in her son's storm. Listen to me carefully. I know everything about the gambling debts, about Victoria's plans for my apartment, about the fake doctor, about the Zurich account. I know it all. A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. You know, how long have you? Long enough. Stay with Lily for now. Don't confront Victoria. Don't let her know you've discovered anything. Can you do that for me? Yes, but Mom, these people I owe money to. They're dangerous. They've started making threats. Victoria said selling your apartment was the only way. Eleanor had cut him off. Victoria has been working with them from the beginning, Robert. She directed you to their establishments. She's been getting a cut of your losses. Silence then, a sound like a wounded animal. Oh God, what have I done? How can you ever forgive me? Forgiveness comes later. Right now we follow the plan. Stay with Lily. Say nothing to Victoria. Can you do that? After Robert's tearful agreement, Eleanor had made her final preparations. The team of attorneys, investigators, and security personnel had taken their positions. The evidence had been compiled and verified. The legal documents had been prepared. All that remained was to spring the trap. On the morning of December 24th, Christmas Eve, Eleanor had been awakened at 5 a.m. by the call from David, her building's security chief. Victoria had arrived with a real estate agent and a doctor claiming to be the new owner of Eleanor's penthouse. Now, as Eleanor sat in her Paris hotel room watching the security feed from her New York apartment, she felt an odd sense of calm. Victoria was strutting through the rooms in a scarlet Valentino dress, pointing out features to the agent like she owned the place. "We want to close immediately," Victoria was saying, her voice crisp and confident. "Starting price $15 million, but we could go as low as $14.5 for a quick sale. My mother-in-law is suffering from severe memory loss. She doesn't even recognize us anymore." The doctor, a small man with nervous eyes whom Eleanor's team had already identified as Alan Gross, a twice-disciplined psychiatrist who'd lost his license in 2 states, nodded solemnly. "Mrs. Blackwell Sr. is in the early stages of dementia. The family has power of attorney and has decided a care facility is the best option." The real estate agent, a tall woman with an expensive haircut, scribbled notes while eyeing the art collection. "The market for luxury penthouses is very strong right now. With these views and this address, we should have no problem getting your asking price or higher." Robert stood in the corner, his face ashen, eyes hollow. He said nothing as Victoria continued her tour, pointing to Eleanor's cherished possessions as if they were merchandise. "This Monet is worth $3.2 million alone," Victoria said, gesturing to the painting that concealed Eleanor's safe. "It goes with the apartment, of course." Her laugh rang out bright and brittle. "We'll need to update the kitchen. It's very 2010, and that master bathroom needs a complete overhaul." Eleanor had such dated taste. Eleanor watched the screen, her expression unchanged, even as Victoria reached her private study and began opening drawers. "Once we clear out all these old papers and legal files, this would make a perfect home gym, don't you think?" The moment had arrived. Eleanor nodded to James, who made a single phone call. In New York, the screens of every television and digital device in Eleanor's penthouse suddenly lit up with the same image: Eleanor Blackwell sitting in an emerald green Chanel suit, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture perfect, her expression composed. Victoria froze mid-sentence, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. The real estate agent took an instinctive step back. "Doctor." Gross knocked over a crystal paperweight in his shock. Only Robert seemed unsurprised, his eyes lifting to the nearest screen with a mixture of shame and relief. Eleanor's voice, clear and measured, filled the room. "Victoria, dear, that dress is stunning, Valentino's winter collection, isn't it? You should enjoy it while you can. I'm afraid prison uniforms come in far fewer color options." At that precise moment, the elevator doors opened to reveal James's legal team, accompanied by 2 NYPD detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit. Behind them came Lily, her face set in determined lines that mirrored her grandmother's. Victoria's perfect face contorted with rage and disbelief. "What is the meaning of this, Robert? Do something." But Robert stepped forward instead, placing himself beside his daughter. "It's over, Victoria. I know everything about the Zurich account, about your plans for my mother, about your connections to the gambling operations. All of it." The doctor was already backing toward the door, but one of the detectives blocked his path. "Alan Gross, you're under arrest for practicing medicine without a license, conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted elder abuse." The real estate agent, sensing disaster, clutched her portfolio to her chest. "I had no idea. Mrs. Blackwell assured me this was all above board." From the screens, Eleanor watched the scene unfold with the same calm she'd maintained throughout her legal career when winning seemingly impossible cases. "Victoria Palmer Blackwell, you made the same mistake many others have made before you. You saw my age and assumed weakness. You saw my politeness and assumed passivity. You saw my wrinkles and thought I was a soft target." Eleanor leaned slightly forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. "But you forgot something crucial. These wrinkles weren't earned in retreat. They were earned in battle. For 50 years, I've faced opponents far more formidable than you in courtrooms and boardrooms across this country. I didn't just survive, I prevailed." As the detectives moved toward Victoria, her mask of sophistication crumbled completely. "This is ridiculous, Robert. Tell them your mother is confused, that she needs help." Robert, standing straighter now than he had in years, shook his head slowly. "The only one who needed help was me, Victoria, and I was too blind to see it until now." The detective read Victoria her rights as Lily moved to stand beside her father, taking his hand in silent support. On the screen, Eleanor's expression softened slightly as she watched her son and granddaughter together. Victoria, you didn't just try to steal my home or my money. You tried to steal my son. You tried to erase me from existence while I was still breathing. That was your gravest miscalculation. As Victoria was led away in handcuffs, still protesting her innocence, Eleanor addressed her son directly for the first time. Robert, we have much to discuss when I return tomorrow. The road ahead won't be easy. You have debts to pay, both financial and moral. But you are still a Blackwell, and Blackwells face their responsibilities. Robert nodded, tears streaming unchecked down his face. I'll be here, Mom. I promise. Eleanor's image remained on the screens for a moment longer, her gaze moving from Robert to Lily, with unmistakable pride in the latter. Then she spoke her final words before the transmission ended. Lily, prepare the dining room for Christmas dinner tomorrow. I'll be taking the first flight home. The screens went dark, leaving father and daughter standing in the sudden silence of the penthouse that had nearly been lost. In Paris, Eleanor closed her laptop and turned to James with a small smile. Book our flights home, James. It seems I'll be having Christmas dinner in New York after all. As snow continued to fall outside her window, Eleanor Blackwell looked out at the Paris skyline one last time. At 77, she had just fought and won perhaps the most personal battle of her life, not with legal briefs or courtroom arguments, but with the same quiet strength she had always possessed. Tomorrow, she would return home to begin rebuilding her relationship with her son, to continue mentoring her granddaughter, and to ensure Victoria faced the full consequences of her actions. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. Robert's gambling debts would need to be addressed. His recovery would be long and difficult. The legal proceedings against Victoria would likely be complex. But Eleanor Blackwell had never shied away from difficulty. After all, every wrinkle on her face told the story of a battle faced and overcome. Every strand of silver in her hair represented wisdom hard won. Her 77 years weren't a burden, they were her greatest asset, her secret weapon in a world that too often equated youth with value. As the first light of Christmas Eve dawned over Paris, Eleanor whispered to herself the truth that Victoria had failed to grasp. They mistake my age for weakness, my kindness for naivety, my silence for surrender. That is why they always lose. The Deux Magots Café buzzed with morning conversations, as Eleanor claimed a corner table, her Hermes scarf arranged perfectly against the December chill. She stirred her espresso with practiced elegance, but her mind remained razor-sharp, focused on the battle unfolding 4,000 miles away. James, in 50 years of practicing law, we've put 37 fraudsters behind bars. I never thought number 38 would be my daughter-in-law. James Anderson settled his lanky frame into the chair opposite her, his silver hair catching the winter light. Years of friendship had created a shorthand between them that required little explanation. He opened his leather portfolio, revealing documents organized with military precision. Victoria Palmer has quite the history. 2 previous marriages to wealthy older men who suddenly experienced cognitive decline shortly after the weddings. Eleanor absorbed this confirmation of her suspicions without visible reaction, though her grip tightened imperceptibly on the delicate espresso cup. Tell me everything. The dossier James presented painted a damning portrait. Victoria Palmer, born Veronica Palermo in Chicago, 1984. First marriage at 22 to Harold Weinstein, 67, owner of a successful regional furniture chain. 11 months after the wedding, Harold had signed over controlling interest in his company to Victoria. 3 months later, he'd been declared incompetent by a doctor who'd later lost his license. Harold had died of a heart attack before the family's legal challenge could proceed. The timing is suspicious to say the least, Eleanor noted, scanning the medical reports, especially considering her second husband followed an almost identical pattern. Victoria's second marriage to Timothy Braddock, a 72-year-old retired banking executive in San Francisco, had lasted 14 months. Once again, a sudden mental decline had been documented by a doctor with questionable credentials. The Braddock children had mounted a more effective legal challenge, but Victoria had settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement before disappearing with an estimated $3.2 million. She's becoming more sophisticated with each iteration, Eleanor observed, making connections only a mind trained through decades of legal practice could see. She's learned from her mistakes. With the first husband, she moved too quickly and took too much. With the second, she was more measured but still targeted the principal directly. With Robert, she's going after the parent instead, less scrutiny, more potential reward. James nodded grimly. She's evolved, and she's no longer working alone. The investigation had uncovered Victoria's network, the discredited Dr. Alan Gross, who specialized in convenient dementia diagnoses, Marcus Weber, a financial advisor who helped create paper trails justifying transfers of assets, and connections to Sunset Gardens, an assisted living facility with several complaints of mysterious deaths under investigation. When you reach 70, the world starts looking through you as if you're made of glass, Eleanor mused, watching Parisians hurry past the cafe window. They forget that glass can magnify, can burn, can reveal truth. I may be invisible to them, but I'm not without power. James's team had also uncovered Victoria's gambling connections. She hadn't just encouraged Robert's addiction. She'd directed him to specific establishments where she had arrangements with the owners. For every $1,000 Robert lost, Victoria received a percentage. His $2 million debt had earned her substantial kickbacks, while simultaneously making him desperate enough to consider stealing from his own mother. She's been playing a long game, James concluded. Based on the evidence, she targeted Robert specifically because of your assets and his vulnerability. His divorce from Elizabeth left him emotionally compromised. Victoria swooped in at precisely the right moment. Eleanor absorbed this information with the calm detachment that had made her legendary in corporate litigation. No outbursts, no wasted emotion, just the steady accumulation of facts that would build an irrefutable case. And the offshore accounts. James slid another document across the table. Victoria has established an account at Banque Centrale de Genève. She's made 4 transfers totaling $840,000 over the past 18 months. Money that should have gone toward Robert's gambling debts. Eleanor's lips thinned to a determined line. So she never intended to help Robert clear his debts. She was going to take the money from my apartment sale and disappear, leaving him to face the consequences alone. The betrayal of her son cut deeply, but the calculated cruelty toward him revealed Victoria's true nature. This wasn't just about money. Victoria enjoyed the manipulation, the destruction of bonds between mother and son, the deliberate dismantling of a family. Eleanor stood moving to the cafe window to watch Paris awaken. Holiday lights twinkled along the boulevard, reminding her this was supposed to be a Christmas vacation. Instead, she was orchestrating a complex legal counteroffensive from 4,000 miles away. I didn't cry when I heard Victoria planning to put me in a nursing home. I didn't rage when I heard my son agree. Emotions are luxuries in warfare, and I am at war. Tears solve nothing strategic planning does. The words emerged with quiet intensity as Eleanor traced a finger along the cold window pane, her reflection ghostly against the city of light. James joined her at the window, their reflections side by side as they had been through 40 years of legal battles. The team is in place, Ellie. Now we wait for Victoria to make her move. They didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Eleanor received an alert from her bank's security system. Someone had attempted to access her reserve account containing $8.3 million. The IP address traced back to Robert's laptop. I taught my son many things, but apparently I didn't teach him that all large deposits have two-factor authentication, Eleanor remarked dryly, as James immediately contacted their cybersecurity team to strengthen protections further. The failed attempt suggested Victoria was growing impatient, perhaps realizing her window of opportunity was limited by Eleanor's eventual return. She was accelerating her timeline, which meant mistakes were more likely. Eleanor's satellite phone rang the secure line established for communications with Lily. "Grandma, you need to see what I found." Within minutes, encrypted files appeared on Eleanor's laptop. Lily had discovered Victoria's personal cloud storage, accessing it through Robert's shared home network. The contents were damning: a detailed Blackwell asset transition plan, outlining every step of Victoria's scheme. The document included Robert's gambling debts categorized as leverage points. Eleanor's estimated net worth significantly undervalued, Eleanor noted with grim satisfaction, and a timeline for having Eleanor declared incompetent. Most disturbing was the section labeled contingency planning, if Eleanor proved resistant. It detailed certain medications that could mimic cognitive decline or in sufficient doses heart failure that would appear natural in a woman of her advanced age. The clinical language couldn't disguise the horror of what Victoria was suggesting: a readiness to murder Eleanor if she became inconvenient. Eleanor's hand remained steady as she scrolled through the document, but her voice when she finally spoke carried an edge James hadn't heard in decades. "She's prepared to kill me if necessary." The discovery transformed their legal strategy into something more urgent. This wasn't just about protecting assets, it was about protecting lives. James immediately contacted Richard Donovan, former FBI deputy director, who deployed additional resources to monitor Victoria's movements and communications. I want her communications tapped, her movements tracked, and I want to know who she's working with. Eleanor instructed her litigation experience taking over. If she's considering murder, she needs accomplices, suppliers. Find them. Within hours, Richard's team had intercepted communications between Victoria and a Swiss banker discussing the transfer of at least $17 million to an account in Zurich, money that would disappear as soon as the penthouse sold, leaving Robert to face his creditors alone. More alarmingly, they discovered Victoria had already contacted a specialist about obtaining medications that wouldn't appear in standard toxicology screenings. The plan was evolving from financial fraud to potential homicide. She's more dangerous than we anticipated, James conceded, updating their legal strategy. We need to move faster. Eleanor's phone rang again. Lily, her voice tense with urgency. Grandma Victoria's pressuring Dad to sign power of attorney documents today. She's saying if he doesn't, some people called the Morelli brothers will collect their debt in other ways. Dad's terrified. Eleanor processed this new threat. The Morelli brothers were known enforcers for gambling operations, notorious for violent collection methods. Is your father with you now? No, he went back to the apartment after finding the Zurich ticket. Victoria convinced him she could explain everything. I've been trying to reach him, but his phone's going straight to voicemail. Eleanor closed her eyes, briefly visualizing the penthouse, mapping potential scenarios. Lily, I need you to go to the apartment building. Don't go upstay in the lobby. Tell David at security that you're concerned about your father and need to check on him. Get eyes on the situation. As Lily carried out this mission, Eleanor moved to the next phase of their counteroffensive. She contacted 3 corporate board members she'd worked with for decades, securing emergency lines of credit that would allow Robert to pay off legitimate gambling debts immediately. She activated estate planning measures created years earlier to protect family assets from potential creditors or divorce settlements. Most importantly, she made arrangements with the New York District Attorney's Office through connections that had remained strong despite her retirement. Victoria wouldn't just face civil penalties, she would face criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted elder abuse, with the potential for attempted murder charges, depending on what evidence could be legally obtained. I'm not angry at Victoria, she's just a predator doing what predators do by instinct. I'm heartbroken for Robert, but I can't save him without teaching him a lesson. Sometimes true love means letting someone face the consequences of their actions. Eleanor shared this reflection with James as they finalized their strategy over dinner at a small bistro near their hotel. James nodded, understanding the complex emotions his old friend was navigating. Robert will need to testify against her. Are you prepared for what that will mean for him? Eleanor set down her glass of Bordeaux, her gaze direct. My son needs to stand on his own feet again. That won't happen if I shield him from the consequences of his choices. He participated in a scheme to defraud his own mother and potentially endanger my life. There must be accountability. The bistro's warm lighting softened Eleanor's features, but her resolve remained steel. This was the side of her that competitors had learned to fear, the unflinching clarity that saw beyond emotion to necessary action. Their strategic dinner was interrupted by another call from Lily. Grandma, I'm in the lobby. David, let me see the security feed. Dad and Victoria are arguing in the study. She's threatening him. She has papers spread out on your desk, and she keeps pointing at them, insisting he sign. Eleanor straightened, instantly alert. Can you hear what they're saying? Not clearly, but she keeps mentioning the Morellis and something about one signature or everything falls apart. Dad looks terrified, Grandma. I've never seen him like this. Eleanor exchanged glances with James. Victoria was forcing Robert to sign immediately, rather than waiting for Eleanor to return and sign herself. The timeline had accelerated, perhaps because Victoria sensed her scheme unraveling. This desperation created both danger and opportunity. Lily, tell David to call the police for a wellness check. Say you're concerned about a domestic dispute involving potential threats. Do not go upstairs yourself under any circumstances. After ending the call, Eleanor turned to James. We move tonight. Call Richard and the legal team. Victoria's showing her hand earlier than expected. Within 30 minutes, Eleanor's suite had transformed into a command center. Richard Donovan coordinated with NYPD contacts. James's legal team prepared emergency injunctions. Digital security experts monitored the penthouse's security feeds, which Eleanor had access to through a private server. The feed showed Victoria growing increasingly agitated, gesturing wildly as she confronted Robert in the study. Though audio wasn't available, her body language conveyed escalating threats. Robert sat slumped in Eleanor's desk chair, his posture defeated, a pen clutched limply in his hand. She's backed him into a corner. Eleanor observed her calm exterior belying the turmoil beneath. Look at his eyes, that's not just fear, that's a man contemplating surrender. As they watched, Victoria's tactics shifted. Her aggressive posture softened. She perched on the desk beside Robert, stroking his hair with calculated tenderness. Her lips moved in what appeared to be soothing reassurances. This manipulation, alternating between threats and comfort, was textbook emotional abuse. She's good, James acknowledged grimly. She knows exactly when to switch tactics. Eleanor watched her son's resistance visibly weakening. Victoria had spent years eroding his confidence, convincing him he needed her to survive. Breaking that psychological dependency wouldn't happen in a single moment of revelation. We need to intervene now, Eleanor decided, before he signs anything. The plan executed with precision. Richard contacted the NYPD officers already en route for the wellness check, upgrading the situation to potential fraud in progress. James activated the first phase of legal countermeasures, freezing accounts Victoria might access. Eleanor herself prepared to make direct contact. On the security feed, they watched 2 NYPD officers arrive at the penthouse door. Victoria immediately transformed, her threatening demeanor replaced by charming confusion as she greeted the officers. Robert remained seated, seemingly unable to speak. She's telling them everything's fine, Richard reported, receiving updates from his NYPD contact. Says they were just having a loud discussion about renovations. Eleanor nodded. Now James. James initiated the call that connected to every screen in the penthouse, simultaneously televisions, computers, even digital picture frames. Eleanor's face appeared on each display, calm and resolute in her hotel suite. The security feed captured Victoria's shock as she turned to find herself surrounded by Eleanor's image. Robert looked up, momentary relief crossing his features before shame forced his gaze downward again. Victoria, Eleanor's voice filled the penthouse. Step away from my son and my desk immediately. Victoria recovered quickly, her expression shifting to concerned sympathy as she addressed the officers. Her lips formed words Eleanor could read even without audio. My poor mother-in-law is confused. This is why we're so concerned about her condition. Eleanor maintained perfect composure. Officers, I am Eleanor Blackwell, owner of this residence. I am perfectly cognizant, as my medical records at New York Presbyterian will confirm. Victoria Blackwell is attempting to defraud me of my property through forged documents and coercion of my son. The officers' uncertainty was visible as they looked between Victoria and the screen showing Eleanor. Victoria escalated her performance, producing papers from her purse that she presented to the officers, likely the falsified medical evaluations from Dr. Gross. Officers, please ask my daughter-in-law about her private meeting last week with Dr. Alan Gross, a physician who lost his license in 2 states for falsifying competency evaluations. Ask her about the $50,000 wire transfer to his Cayman account on December 12th. Eleanor's voice remained measured, but each word landed with precision. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. She hadn't expected Eleanor to know these details. Her hand moved to her designer bag, perhaps seeking her phone or other documents to counter these claims. Victoria, I wouldn't. Eleanor's warning carried such authority that Victoria's hand froze mid-motion. Everything you say and do is being recorded and will be admissible in court. The district attorney's office is already preparing charges of criminal fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Your Swiss banker, Mr. Hoffman, is cooperating with authorities to avoid money laundering charges. Your accomplice, Dr. Gross, was taken into custody 20 minutes ago. This was a calculated exaggeration. Arrangements with the Swiss authorities were still being finalized, but the psychological impact was immediate. Victoria's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking escape routes, evaluating options. Robert finally found his voice, though it emerged broken and hoarse. Mom, I didn't know. I knew, but I didn't understand. The medications. I never would have let her. Eleanor's expression softened slightly when addressing her son. We'll discuss your involvement later, Robert. For now, please give the officers your phone. They'll find Victoria's texts threatening you regarding the Morelli brothers. Victoria's control snapped. You stupid old woman, you think you're so clever with your lawyers and your connections. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Her polished veneer vanished completely, revealing the calculating predator beneath. Eleanor remained unmoved by the outburst. On the contrary, Victoria, I know exactly what you're capable of. I've read your Blackwell asset transition plan, including the contingency section detailing how you would medicate me into apparent dementia or heart failure if necessary. Your conversation with the supplier you called Dr. M about untraceable pharmaceuticals was intercepted yesterday. Victoria lunged for her bag, but one of the officers moved faster, securing it before she could reach inside. The second officer stepped between her and Robert, who sat frozen at the desk. Search her bag, Eleanor instructed. You'll find a prescription bottle labeled Ambien that actually contains a cocktail of benzodiazepines and other sedatives she's been giving my son to keep him compliant. The officer emptied the contents of Victoria's designer bag onto a side table. Among the expected items, Wallet Cosmetics' phone was indeed a prescription bottle with Robert's name on it. Victoria's desperate lunge toward the bottle confirmed its importance before the officers restrained her. Robert has been experiencing unexplained drowsiness and memory issues for months, Eleanor continued. Blood tests will show he's been systematically drugged. Not enough to cause obvious impairment, but sufficient to keep him suggestible and dependent. The realization that he'd been drugged seemed to awaken something in Robert. He stood on unsteady legs, moving away from Victoria toward the windows overlooking Central Park. You've been all this time. When I couldn't remember conversations or felt confused, Victoria's strategy collapsed entirely. Robert, darling, don't listen to her. I've only ever tried to help you. Your gambling was destroying us. I needed to do something. Robert's spine straightened slightly, a ghost of his father's posture emerging. You introduced me to those card games. You encouraged me to play just one more hand. You knew the dealers at every table. The elevator doors opened, revealing James's associate, Rebecca Chen, with a team of lawyers and digital forensic experts. Behind them came Lily, who had refused to remain in the lobby once the police were on scene. Dad! Lily rushed to Robert's side, supporting him as he swayed slightly. Victoria, seeing her schemes collapsing around her, made one final desperate attempt. This is absurd. I demand to speak with my attorney immediately. You can't just invade our home based on the ravings of an old woman 4,000 miles away. Eleanor's image on the screens remained composed. This isn't your home, Victoria. It never was. And you seem confused about one critical fact. I'm not just an old woman. I'm Eleanor Blackwell. For 50 years, I've faced down corporate raiders, hostile takeovers, and federal prosecutors. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals and outmaneuvered some of the most ruthless minds on Wall Street. Eleanor leaned slightly closer to the camera, her diamond earrings catching the light. You targeted me because you thought age had weakened me. You saw my wrinkles and assumed I was soft, my silver hair, and thought I was feeble. You forgot that this mind, she tapped her temple with one perfectly manicured finger, has been honed through decades of legal warfare. You're not the first predator I've encountered, Victoria. You're simply the least impressive. The officers proceeded with Victoria's arrest, reciting her rights as she alternated between threats and tearful pleas. The evidence against her was overwhelming: the detailed transition plan, the falsified medical reports, the drugged medication, the offshore accounts, the recorded threats. Robert watched in stunned silence as Victoria was led toward the elevator. Just before the doors closed, she fixed him with a venomous glare. You're nothing without me. Nothing. You'll crawl back begging within a week. When Victoria had been removed, Robert collapsed onto the nearest chair, his face buried in his hands. Mom, I don't even know where to begin. Eleanor's expression softened further. Begin by telling the officers and Ms. Chen everything, Robert. Every detail, every threat, every manipulation. Your cooperation will matter during sentencing. Robert looked up, confusion clouding his features. Sentencing for Victoria, you mean? For both of you, Robert. Eleanor's words fell like gentle rain, necessary but painful. You participated in a scheme to defraud your own mother. There will be legal consequences, though your cooperation and the evidence of Victoria's manipulation will mitigate them significantly. Robert paled, the reality of his situation finally penetrating the fog of manipulation and medications. I could go to prison. That's unlikely with the evidence of coercion and drugging, but there will be financial penalties, community service, and mandatory rehabilitation for your gambling addiction. You need to face the consequences of your choices, Robert. That's the only way forward. Lily stood beside her father, one hand on his shoulder. Dad, Grandma's right. You need help, real help, not Victoria's version of it. For several moments, Robert seemed to struggle internally. Then, with visible effort, he straightened his shoulders and nodded. I'll tell them everything. And Mom, I know saying sorry isn't enough. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am sorry more than I can express. Eleanor regarded her son thoughtfully. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment, Robert. It begins with truth, continues with accountability, and requires sustained change. We'll start with the truth today. As Robert began giving his statement to the officers, Eleanor addressed her granddaughter. Lily, there's a safe behind the Monet in my study. The combination is your birthday month day, last 2 digits of year. Inside you'll find documents for the attorneys and a letter addressed to you. Please retrieve them. Lily moved to the painting, carefully removing it to reveal the hidden safe. When she opened it, she found not only the legal documents, but several jewelry boxes and stacks of files documenting Eleanor's complete financial empire, far more extensive than Victoria had ever imagined. Grandma, there's millions documented here. Properties I never knew about, investments, trusts. Lily's voice trailed off as she paged through the records. Your grandfather and I believed in quiet success, Lily. Flaunting wealth attracts exactly the kind of predator Victoria represents. Eleanor's image on the screen smiled slightly. Bring the blue folder marked Contingency to Ms. Chen. It contains evidence I've been gathering since I first became suspicious of Victoria 3 months ago. As Lily handed over the folder, Rebecca Chen opened it and began scanning the contents with growing admiration. Mrs. Blackwell, this is extraordinarily thorough. You documented everything: dates, times, conversations, financial movements. This alone would secure convictions. Eleanor nodded acknowledgement. I didn't practice law for 50 years without learning how to build an airtight case, Ms. Chen. While the legal team processed the evidence and Robert continued his statement, Eleanor spoke privately with Lily through a separate connection on Lily's phone. How are you holding up, dear one? Lily moved to the kitchen for privacy, her composure finally cracking slightly. I'm scared for Dad, angry at Victoria, worried about you. It's overwhelming, Grandma. Eleanor's face on the phone screen radiated gentle strength. You've shown remarkable courage and intelligence through all this, Lily. Your grandfather would be tremendously proud of you, as am I. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. I just want our family back, the way it was before Victoria. We won't go back, we'll go forward, Eleanor corrected gently. Your father needs to rebuild himself from the foundation up. That takes time and hard work. But he has you, and he has me, and that gives him a fighting chance. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the living room. One of the officers called for Lily, urgency in his voice. She rushed back to find Robert slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow, his skin ashen. Dad, Lily knelt beside him as the officer called for paramedics. Eleanor, witnessing this through the security feed, acted immediately. Check his pulse and pupils. Victoria may have given him something before the police arrived, a final insurance policy. The next hour unfolded in controlled chaos. Paramedics arrived, confirming Robert was experiencing symptoms consistent with benzodiazepine overdose. He was rushed to New York Presbyterian, the same hospital where he had been born 48 years earlier. Eleanor coordinated everything from Paris, arranging for toxicology experts, securing the hospital room, and ensuring Victoria remained in custody with no communication privileges. She mobilized resources with the swift efficiency that had made her legendary in corporate America, her voice never rising, her commands never needing repetition. Victoria must have given him something just before the police arrived, a final act of control, Eleanor theorized as she and James prepared for their emergency flight back to New York. She knew her plan was failing, so she ensured Robert wouldn't be able to testify immediately. James shook his head grimly. She's more dangerous than we anticipated. If Robert had been alone when the medication took full effect. But he wasn't, Eleanor interrupted firmly. Lily was there. The police were there. Our team was there. Victoria failed because she couldn't imagine I would have such resources at my disposal. The classic mistake of underestimating one's opponent. Their flight was scheduled for 11 p.m. landing in New York early Christmas morning. As they prepared to leave for the airport, Eleanor received one final call from the hospital. Robert was stabilized, the overdose identified and treated. He was sedated but expected to make a full recovery. He was lucky, the attending physician informed her. The combination of drugs in his system could have been fatal if treatment had been delayed even 30 minutes. Someone wanted to ensure he wouldn't be speaking to authorities anytime soon. Eleanor absorbed this information with the same outward calm she had maintained throughout the crisis. Only James, who had known her for decades, recognized the subtle tightening around her eyes that signaled deep emotion controlled through iron discipline. "Thank you, Doctor. My granddaughter will remain with him until I arrive tomorrow morning. Please ensure no one except medical personnel and my designated security team enters his room." After ending the call, Eleanor stood motionless by the hotel window, Paris sparkling below on Christmas Eve. For the first time since the crisis began, she allowed herself a moment of genuine emotion, not for Victoria's betrayal or the near loss of her assets, but for the son who had nearly died in a scheme targeting her. She would have killed him. The words emerged barely above a whisper. Once the money was secured, Robert would have become a liability to her. His death would have been made to look like suicide, driven by gambling debts or an accidental overdose. James didn't contradict her. The evidence supported this assessment. Victoria had never intended for Robert to survive once his usefulness ended. Her willingness to administer a potentially fatal overdose at the first sign of her scheme collapsing demonstrated how disposable he was in her calculations. "We should have anticipated this move." Eleanor continued self-recrimination evident despite her controlled tone. "I was focused on protecting my assets when I should have been focused on protecting my son." James approached carefully, respecting Eleanor's rare moment of vulnerability. "You couldn't have known she would move so quickly, and because of your preparations, help was there when Robert needed it. You did save him, Ellie." Eleanor turned from the window, her composure reinstated. "We have a flight to catch, James. My son and granddaughter are waiting." As their car navigated through Paris toward Charles de Gaulle Airport, Eleanor reviewed the day's events with analytical precision. Victoria was in custody, facing serious charges. Robert was hospitalized but would recover. The evidence was secure. The financial damage was contained. Yet beneath this clinical assessment ran a deeper current of understanding. The true damage wasn't to portfolios or property, it was to trust to family bonds, to Robert's sense of self. Rebuilding those would require more than legal strategies or financial acumen. It would demand a kind of strength Eleanor wasn't sure her son possessed. "Robert has always taken the path of least resistance," she confided to James as the city lights blurred past. William saw it early, that tendency to avoid difficult confrontations, to seek external validation rather than internal fortitude. "I sometimes wonder if we enabled it by making his life too comfortable." James considered this thoughtfully. Perhaps, but remember how fiercely independent he was with Elizabeth. How determined to build his own career without trading on the Blackwell name. That strength is still inside him, buried under years of Victoria's manipulation. Eleanor nodded slowly. "You're right. Victoria didn't create Robert's weaknesses, she exploited them. And now he has the chance to confront them, if he's brave enough." Their car approached the airport terminal's Christmas decorations, twinkling incongruously against the security checkpoints and hurried travelers. Eleanor gazed out at the scene, her mind already in New York, planning the difficult conversations ahead. "This Christmas will be unlike any we've experienced," she observed quietly. "But perhaps it will be more authentic than most. No pretense, no polite fictions, just the raw truth of who we are and what we mean to each other." As they exited the vehicle, Eleanor paused to look up at the clear December sky. Somewhere above those stars, William was watching. She hoped he would approve of how she'd protected their son, not by shielding him from consequences, but by ensuring he faced them with dignity and support. "Merry Christmas, William," she whispered to the night air. "Our boy needs us both tonight." The terminal doors slid open, welcoming Eleanor Blackwell toward the next battle in a war she never expected to fight, not for her wealth or her home, but for her son's very soul. Christmas morning in New York arrived with silent snowfall blanketing the city in pristine white. The harsh edges of skyscrapers softened under nature's temporary truce. Eleanor Blackwell's town car glided through empty streets toward New York Presbyterian Hospital, the vehicle's interior still carrying the ghost scent of Paris perfume and airplane cabin. Lily texted that Robert had a stable night, James informed her, his iPad displaying a stream of updates from their legal team. Victoria remains in custody, bail hearing scheduled for December 26th. Her attorney is arguing for immediate release based on, quote, unsubstantiated allegations from an elderly woman showing signs of paranoia and confusion. Eleanor removed her calfskin gloves with methodical precision. Predictable strategy, has Dr. Till. Gross started cooperating. Fully. Once we presented him with the evidence of his previous license revocations and the money trail to his Cayman account, he collapsed like a house of cards. He's providing details about Victoria's instructions regarding your supposed competency evaluation. The car turned onto York Avenue, the hospital's modernist facade looming ahead. Eleanor's reflection in the window showed not a woman who had been traveling for 9 hours, but the composed, elegant force who had dominated boardrooms for decades. Her silver hair was immaculate. Her emerald Chanel suit unwrinkled her posture, military straight, despite her 77 years. What about the medications found in Robert's system? Eleanor's voice remained steady, betraying none of the maternal anguish she had permitted herself to feel briefly in Paris. James consulted another report. Toxicology confirmed a dangerous mixture of benzodiazepines, including some not available by prescription in the U.S. The dosage was nearly 3 times what would be considered therapeutic. The attending physician has documented his opinion that this was not self-administered the timeline, and Robert's physical conditions support the conclusion that someone else administered the drugs shortly before the police arrived. Eleanor nodded once, absorbing this final confirmation of Victoria's willingness to potentially kill Robert rather than allow him to testify. Add attempted murder to the charges. The town car stopped at the hospital's private entrance where Richard Donovan waited with 2 security professionals. Eleanor emerged from the vehicle into the Christmas morning chill, her breath creating delicate clouds that dissipated in seconds. "Merry Christmas, Ellie." Richard's gruff voice carried decades of shared history. "Quite a homecoming you've arranged." Eleanor accepted his brief embrace. "Not quite the holiday gathering I had envisioned, Richard. How is the security situation? Tight as a drum. Victoria's remaining associates have been identified and are under surveillance. Robert's room has both electronic and human monitoring. No one gets within 50 feet without clearance." The small group moved through the hospital's hushed corridors, Christmas decorations providing incongruous cheer against the institutional backdrop. Eleanor walked with the same confident stride she had used approaching witness stands and podiums, her Ferragamo heels clicking a steady rhythm on the polished floors. Outside Robert's private room, Lily waited, her young face showing the strain of her overnight vigil. When she saw her grandmother, emotion overtook her law school composure. She rushed forward, embracing Eleanor with the desperate strength of someone who had been treading water awaiting rescue. "Grandma," the word emerged half-sob against Eleanor's shoulder. "I'm so glad you're here." Eleanor held her granddaughter tightly, one hand cradling the back of Lily's head as she had done when Lily was a child afraid of thunderstorms. "You've been remarkably brave, my dear one. I'm so proud of you." They separated after a moment, Eleanor's hands remaining on Lily's shoulders as she assessed her granddaughter's condition. "You need rest. James will take you back to the penthouse to sleep. Security will remain with you." Lily shook her head firmly. "I'm staying, Grandma. Dad needs both of us right now." Eleanor recognized the set of Lily's jaw, the same determined expression William had worn when facing down hostile takeover attempts. Rather than argue, she simply nodded. "Then let's see your father together." The hospital room fell silent as Eleanor entered. Robert lay against white pillows, an IV dripping clear fluid into his arm, monitoring equipment creating a sterile electronic symphony around him. He looked diminished somehow, the confident financial executive replaced by a hollow-eyed man confronting the wreckage of his life. His gaze met hers, then immediately dropped to his hands folded atop the hospital blanket. "Mom," Eleanor moved to his bedside with measured steps, taking in the medical readouts with a quick, practiced glance. "Robert." She placed her hand over his, noting how cold his fingers felt despite the room's warmth. "You gave us quite a scare." Robert's attempt at a smile faltered, collapsing before it fully formed. "The doctors say Victoria gave me enough drugs to—" He couldn't finish the sentence, the reality still too raw to articulate. "Yes." Eleanor didn't soften the truth with platitudes. "She was willing to sacrifice you once you were no longer useful to her scheme." Robert flinched as though struck. For several heartbeats, the only sound was the rhythmic beep of monitoring equipment. When he finally spoke, his voice emerged rough with emotion. "I let her into our lives. I gave her access to everything, to you, to our family's legacy. I was so desperate for her approval that I couldn't see what she really was." Eleanor settled into the chair beside his bed, arranging herself with the same dignity she would have shown in a federal courtroom. "Victoria is a skilled predator, Robert. She selected you specifically because of your vulnerabilities, your recent divorce, your childhood feelings of inadequacy compared to your father, your tendency to seek external validation rather than internal strength. Robert's eyes widened slightly at his mother's unvarnished assessment. You knew all that about how I felt growing up. Of course I knew. I'm your mother. Eleanor's gaze softened fractionally. I've watched you struggle with William's shadow your entire life. Victoria recognized that same weakness and exploited it masterfully. Lily moved to the opposite side of the bed, taking her father's other hand. Dad, Victoria had this whole operation planned. She's done it before to other families. She drugged you, manipulated you, isolated you from everyone who truly cared about you. Robert absorbed these painful truths in silence, his face reflecting the internal recalibration happening within. Finally, he looked directly at Eleanor. What happens now legally? Eleanor appreciated her son's willingness to face consequences, perhaps the first sign that recovery was possible. Victoria will be charged with multiple felonies, fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, and now attempted murder based on the overdose. Given the evidence, and Dr. Gross's cooperation conviction is virtually certain. Robert nodded slowly. And me will I be charged too? Yes. Eleanor wouldn't insult her son with comforting lies. However, the evidence of Victoria's manipulation, the documentation of her systematically drugging you, and your immediate cooperation with authorities will likely result in minimal legal consequences, probation, restitution, community service. Robert closed his eyes briefly. I deserve worse. Perhaps. Eleanor's tone remained matter-of-fact. But criminal sentencing isn't about what one deserves. It's about justice and rehabilitation. Your true punishment will come from within, Robert, living with the knowledge of your choices and rebuilding your life accordingly. Christmas Day unfolded in that hospital room so different from the elegant holiday celebrations of previous years. No carefully decorated tree, no gourmet meals served on Blackwell family china dating back generations. Instead, the small family shared hospital cafeteria coffee and vending machine snacks, while outside the window, snow continued its silent transformation of the city. By afternoon, Robert was strong enough to provide his formal statement to the district attorney's representatives. Eleanor and James remained present as Robert detailed Victoria's systematic isolation techniques, the gambling debts that had made him vulnerable to her manipulation, and his gradual awareness that something was deeply wrong. At first, I thought I was just getting forgetful, maybe early dementia, like Victoria suggested. Robert explained, his voice gaining strength as the narrative progressed. I'd lose track of conversations, couldn't remember signing documents she said I'd signed. When I questioned her, she'd show me my signature, tell me I was scaring her with these memory lapses. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, made careful notes. And the gambling, how did that begin? Robert's hands twisted in the hospital blanket. After my divorce from Elizabeth, I was at loose ends. Victoria suggested we visit Atlantic City for a weekend. Just some harmless fun, she called it. She knew exactly which tables to visit, introduced me to the high-stakes dealers by name. When I won, she was ecstatic. When I lost, she was sympathetic, but encouraging just one more hand, the next one would turn it around. Did she gamble alongside you? Rarely and never significant amounts. She preferred to watch always with a specific dealer she claimed was lucky for me. Robert's expression reflected dawning comprehension. They were working together, weren't they? The dealers, Victoria, it was all coordinated. The prosecutor nodded. We've identified connections between Victoria and 3 gambling operations in Atlantic City and 2 illegal establishments in Manhattan. She received kickbacks based on your losses, approximately 15%. Robert's face drained of color. All those times she comforted me after I lost thousands. She was profiting from it. The evidence suggests she deliberately targeted you as a Blackwell heir, orchestrated your gambling addiction, then used the resulting debts as leverage to force your cooperation in accessing your mother's assets. Eleanor watched her son absorb each devastating revelation, noting the progression of emotions across his face, shock giving way to comprehension, then humiliation, and finally, most promising for his recovery, anger. I want to testify against her, Robert declared, sitting straighter against his pillows. Whatever happens to me legally, I want to make sure Victoria never does this to anyone else. The prosecutor closed her notebook. Your testimony will be invaluable, Mr. Blackwell. Given the circumstances and your cooperation, we'll be recommending minimal charges accessory after the fact, with a suspended sentence contingent upon completion of gambling addiction treatment and financial restitution. After the prosecutor departed, Robert turned to Eleanor, his expression more focused than she had seen in years. "I'll pay back everything, Mom. Not just legally, but personally. Whatever it takes." Eleanor studied her son, searching for the authentic resolve behind his words. "Recovery isn't a declaration, Robert. It's a daily choice, often painful, always challenging. Are you prepared for that reality?" "No," Robert admitted, surprising her with his candor. "I'm not prepared. I'm terrified, but I'm going to do it anyway because I refuse to remain the weak, manipulated man Victoria created." For the first time since arriving at the hospital, Eleanor smiled, a genuine expression that softened the elegant planes of her face. "Now that sounds like William Blackwell's son." The medical team determined Robert would need to remain hospitalized for another 48 hours for observation and to begin supervised withdrawal from the substances Victoria had been administering. With his immediate medical situation stabilized, Eleanor finally returned to the penthouse accompanied by Lily and their security detail. The apartment felt different, somehow tainted by Victoria's presence, by the betrayal that had unfolded within its walls. Eleanor moved through the familiar rooms, noting changes Victoria had implemented during her absence. Family photographs removed William's beloved first edition books, rearranged Eleanor's preferred throw pillows, replaced with gaudy alternatives reflecting Victoria's taste. "She was erasing me even before I was gone," Eleanor observed, running her finger along the mantel, where photographs of Robert's childhood had been removed. Systematic elimination of the past to control the narrative of the present. Lily followed her grandmother into the study where Victoria had been preparing to conduct the fraudulent transfer. "She had Dad completely convinced you were becoming senile. She'd move things around, then claim you had misplaced them. She'd tell him you'd said things you never said, then act concerned when you couldn't remember these conversations." Eleanor paused before the Monet now rehung after the safe had been accessed. A classic gaslighting technique. Question the victim's perception until they question it themselves. "Dad wanted to believe her," Lily continued, settling into one of the leather chairs. "It was easier than facing the truth that the woman he loved was systematically destroying his relationship with you and me." Eleanor turned from the painting, studying her granddaughter with appreciative eyes. "You've developed remarkable insight, Lily. Harvard Law is getting a formidable mind." Lily shrugged momentarily, looking like the uncertain teenager she had been not so long ago. "I just paid attention. And I remembered who my grandmother is, not someone who would suddenly forget conversations or misplace treasured possessions." Eleanor moved to her desk, noting with displeasure Victoria's fingerprints still visible on the polished mahogany surface. "We'll need to reclaim this space, sage smudging, at minimum perhaps complete redecoration. Victoria's energy lingers like a bad perfume." The attempt at lightness fell flat. Eleanor sank into her desk chair, suddenly looking every one of her 77 years. "I should have seen this coming sooner, Lily. All the warning signs were there. Robert's increasing isolation, his vague explanations about finances, Victoria's pointed questions about my estate planning. I was so determined not to interfere in his marriage that I overlooked the obvious predator at our table." Lily crossed to her grandmother, kneeling beside the desk chair. "Grandma, you figured it out in time. You saved Dad's life. You protected our family's legacy. No one could have done more." Eleanor placed her hand on Lily's cheek, the gesture uncharacteristically demonstrative for a woman known for her reserved nature. "You saved him too, you know. Your determination to maintain contact, your careful documentation of Victoria's behavior, your courage in coming forward with your suspicions. Without those elements, we might be planning Robert's funeral now rather than his recovery." The harsh reality of how narrowly disaster had been averted hung in the air between them. After a moment, Eleanor straightened her shoulders, her moment of vulnerability carefully tucked away. "We should rest. Tomorrow we'll bring the legal proceedings against Victoria, and we need to be prepared." The bail hearing the following morning exemplified the stark contrast between appearance and reality that had defined Victoria's presence in their lives. The woman who entered the courtroom bore little resemblance to the sophisticated, polished figure who had charmed her way into the Blackwell family. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit. Her carefully highlighted hair hung limp around a face stripped of expertly applied makeup. Eleanor, Lily, and James sat in the front row, a unified presence that drew Victoria's immediate attention. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted Eleanor, a flash of genuine hatred breaking through her carefully constructed mask of injured innocence. Victoria's attorney, an expensive criminal defense lawyer known for representing wealthy clients in high-profile cases, argued passionately for bail. Your Honor, Mrs. Blackwell is a respected interior designer with deep community ties. These allegations stem from a family dispute involving an elderly woman who, with all due respect, has demonstrated concerning cognitive issues. My client poses no flight risk and should be released on her own recognizance pending trial. The prosecutor countered with the evidence collected Victoria's documented history of similar schemes against wealthy older individuals, the detailed Blackwell asset transition plan, outlining her fraudulent intentions, the offshore accounts prepared for the stolen funds, and most damning the toxicology report showing the near-lethal drug cocktail administered to Robert. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence Mrs. Blackwell purchased a one-way ticket to Zurich scheduled for December 26th, tomorrow, and transferred substantial funds to a Swiss account under an alias. She represents the definition of a flight risk. Victoria's composure cracked as the judge denied bail, ordering her remanded to custody as a flight risk and potential danger to witnesses. This is absurd. Her voice echoed through the courtroom, the cultivated social polish evaporating completely. That old woman is manipulating all of you. She's the one who should be locked up. As security personnel moved to remove Victoria, she locked eyes with Eleanor across the courtroom. You think you've won? You have no idea what I've set in motion? Your precious son will never recover from what I've done to him. I made sure of that. The threat hung in the air as Victoria was led away, leaving a disturbed murmur rippling through the courtroom. Eleanor remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged, though Lily noticed her grandmother's knuckles had whitened where she gripped her handbag. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered hungry for details about the scandal involving one of New York's most prominent families. Eleanor navigated through them with practiced dignity, offering no comment beyond a prepared statement read by James. The Blackwell family is cooperating fully with authorities and asks for privacy during this difficult time. Justice will be served through proper legal channels. Once safely in the town car, Eleanor finally addressed Victoria's parting threat. What did she mean, James, what I've set in motion? James was already on his phone, coordinating with their security team. Could be an empty threat designed to unsettle you. Could be accomplices we haven't identified. Could be something else entirely. We're investigating all possibilities. Eleanor stared through the car window at the winter cityscape, her mind calculating variables with the same precision that had made her a legal legend. Increase security at the hospital. Check all of Robert's accounts again, financial, email, social media. Review the penthouse for any surveillance devices Victoria might have planted. The day progressed with methodical purpose. Eleanor divided her time between the hospital where Robert continued to improve physically while beginning the psychological work of recovery and meetings with the legal team, building the case against Victoria. By evening, security experts had swept the penthouse, removing 3 hidden recording devices Victoria had installed in the study, master bedroom, and living room. She was monitoring your private conversations for months, the security consultant explained, displaying the sophisticated bugs. Gathering information, learning patterns, identifying vulnerabilities. Eleanor absorbed this violation of her home with outward calm, though inwardly she felt a cold fury building. Check my phone and computers as well, and Robert's devices, of course. As suspected, spyware was discovered on Robert's laptop and phone, giving Victoria access to his emails, financial records, and location data. More disturbing was the discovery of similar malware on Eleanor's personal devices, malware sophisticated enough to bypass her standard security measures. She had access to everything, Lily whispered, horrified by the implications. Your emails with your financial advisors, your conversations with the corporate boards you sit on, your private communications. Eleanor's expression hardened. Which means she likely has compromising information on more than just our family. Check my contact list and recent correspondence. Identify anyone who might be vulnerable to blackmail or manipulation based on their communications with me. The investigation expanded outward, revealing the true scope of Victoria's operation. She hadn't just targeted the Blackwell family's assets, she had harvested potentially damaging information about Eleanor's extensive network of business associates, legal clients, and social connections. The hidden recordings included conversations with corporate board members discussing sensitive business matters, communications with political figures seeking legal advice, and personal exchanges that could prove embarrassing if made public. She was creating an insurance policy, James concluded grimly after reviewing the findings. Ammunition to use against you if her primary scheme failed, which it has. Eleanor processed this assessment with the strategic clarity that had served her throughout her career. Contact everyone potentially compromised. Full disclosure, no exceptions. Better they hear it from us than have it used against them later. While James began this massive damage control operation, Eleanor returned to the hospital for evening visiting hours. Robert had been moved from intensive care to a private recovery room, his physical condition stabilizing, though his emotional state remained fragile. Victoria's bail was denied, Eleanor informed him, settling into the visitor's chair with characteristic grace. She'll remain in custody through trial. Robert nodded, his gaze fixed on the window where evening snow had resumed. I heard she made some kind of threat in court. The nurses were whispering about it. Merely the desperate tactics of someone whose schemes have collapsed, Eleanor replied, deliberately minimizing Victoria's outburst while making a mental note to speak with the hospital staff about discretion. Robert turned to face his mother fully. Don't protect me, Mom. Not anymore. Whatever Victoria said, whatever she's planning, I need to know. I need to face it. Eleanor studied her son, weighing his newfound resolve against his still fragile recovery. Finally, she decided on honesty. Victoria had been recording conversations in our home for months. She gathered potentially damaging information about numerous individuals in my professional and personal circles. We believe she intends to use this information as leverage or revenge. Robert closed his eyes, briefly absorbing another layer of Victoria's betrayal. I brought her into our lives. Whatever damage she causes is ultimately my responsibility. No. Eleanor's voice carried the same authority that had swayed juries and corporate boards. You were a victim of calculated manipulation by a skilled predator. You bear responsibility for your own choices, yes, but not for Victoria's premeditated schemes. Robert seemed about to argue, then stopped himself, a new awareness crossing his features. That's what she would want, isn't it? For me to collapse under guilt, to feel so responsible that I'm paralyzed. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. Precisely. The most effective manipulation continues working even after it's been exposed. Robert shifted in the hospital bed, his movements more purposeful than they had been since his admission. I want to help neutralize whatever she's planning. I know how she thinks, how she operates. I can anticipate her next moves. For the first time since the crisis began, Eleanor saw a glimpse of the son she had raised, not the weakened man Victoria had crafted, but the strategic thinker who carried Blackwell DNA. Very well. When you're discharged tomorrow, we'll incorporate your insights into our counter-strategy. Their conversation was interrupted by Lily's arrival, her expression tense. Grandma, there's a situation at the penthouse. James says you need to come right away. Eleanor rose immediately, her intuition sensing the unfolding of Victoria's threatened consequences. What's happened? A courier delivered a package addressed to you. The security team scanned it, not explosive, no biological agents, but James doesn't want to open it without you present. Eleanor turned to Robert, who nodded his understanding. Go. I'll be fine here. The town car moved swiftly through evening traffic, Christmas decorations, creating surreal contrast against the urgency Eleanor felt. At the penthouse, James waited in the foyer, his expression grim. The package came with this note. He handed Eleanor a cream-colored envelope addressed in Victoria's distinctive handwriting. Eleanor opened it, unfolding a single sheet of expensive stationery. Dearest Mother Blackwell, Merry Christmas from prison. Since you've been so determined to take everything from me, I thought I'd leave you a parting gift. Inside this package, you'll find USB drives containing every conversation I recorded in your home, every email I intercepted, every secret I discovered about your precious friends and associates. By the time you read this, copies will have been sent to selected journalists, unless $10 million is wired to an account my attorney will provide. Consider it the price of discretion. With warmest holiday wishes, Victoria. Eleanor read the note twice, then handed it to Lily. Predictable. She assumes money is my primary concern, that I would sacrifice integrity to protect reputation. James gestured to the package sitting on the entryway table. Security has cleared it. Contents appear to be exactly what she described, multiple USB drives labeled by date and subject. Eleanor approached the package, its innocuous appearance belying the potential devastation it contained. Has she actually contacted journalists? We're monitoring all communications from her attorney and known associates. So far, no evidence of information being distributed, but that doesn't mean arrangements weren't made before her arrest. Eleanor considered their options with the same methodical analysis she had applied to complex legal cases throughout her career. Victoria was attempting to regain control through blackmail, a desperate but potentially effective strategy given the sensitive nature of the information she had gathered. Victoria made one critical miscalculation. Eleanor finally said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. She believes my reputation is worth more to me than my integrity. She's wrong. Lily stepped closer, concern evident in her expression. Grandma, some of these recordings could damage more than reputation. There are conversations about corporate mergers, judicial appointments, political strategies. Yes. Eleanor nodded, acknowledging the stakes. People trusted me with their confidences. That trust has been violated not by me, but through me. The proper response isn't to pay blackmail, but to take responsibility for the breach. Eleanor moved to her study, James and Lily following as she outlined her decision. Contact everyone potentially affected. Inform them of the situation, including the possibility their private communications may become public. Offer my personal apology and whatever legal assistance we can provide. James looked skeptical. Ellie, that's dozens of powerful people, corporate leaders, judges, political figures. The fallout could be significant. The fallout from attempted cover-up would be worse. Eleanor seated herself at her desk, the command center from which she had directed legal strategies for decades. Draft a public statement acknowledging that my home was compromised by Victoria, that private conversations were recorded without consent, and that I take full responsibility for failing to detect this invasion of privacy. Lily watched her grandmother with growing admiration. You're getting ahead of the story instead of running from it. The first rule of crisis management, Eleanor confirmed. Control the narrative before it controls you. Victoria expects me to panic, to scramble defensively, perhaps even to pay her blackmail. Instead, we'll transform her weapon into a demonstration of integrity. Through the evening hours, the Blackwell team executed Eleanor's strategy with precision. Personal calls were made to everyone potentially compromised. A carefully worded public statement was prepared for release the following morning. Legal proceedings were initiated against Victoria for wiretapping and privacy violations, additional charges to strengthen the existing case. By midnight, the immediate crisis had been contained. Victoria's attorney, upon learning of Eleanor's proactive response, withdrew any association with the blackmail attempt, clearly recognizing a losing strategy when he saw one. Victoria's last gambit has failed, James confirmed as the team concluded their emergency session. She has nothing left to threaten you with. Eleanor stood at the study window watching Christmas lights twinkle across the park. Victoria made the same mistake many adversaries have made before her. She measured me by conventional standards of reputation and public image. She forgot that I built my career on substance, not appearance. As the clock passed midnight, marking the transition to December 26th, Eleanor made one final call to Robert's hospital room where Lily had returned to continue her vigil. The situation has been addressed, Eleanor informed them. Victoria's attempt at blackmail has been neutralized. Robert's voice came through the speakerphone, stronger than it had been since his hospitalization. What did you do, Mom? I chose transparency over secrecy, responsibility over denial. Eleanor's response carried the weight of a lifetime guided by principle. When faced with the threat of exposure, I simply removed its power by acknowledging the breach myself. The line fell silent for a moment before Robert spoke again, his voice carrying newfound respect. That's not what Victoria would have expected. She thought she knew your vulnerabilities, but she didn't understand your strengths at all. Few adversaries do, Eleanor acknowledged. They see age and assume weakness, silver hair, and expect fragility. They forget that these wrinkles weren't earned in retreat, they were earned in victory. After ending the call, Eleanor moved through the penthouse, mentally reclaiming each space Victoria had attempted to appropriate. In the master bedroom, she opened her jewelry box, removing the diamond earrings William had given her on their 40th anniversary. She placed them on her ears, their familiar weight a connection to the partnership that had defined her adult life. We raised him well, after all, William, she spoke softly to the empty room. It just took a crisis for his true character to emerge. Morning brought Robert's discharge from the hospital. Eleanor personally supervised his return to the penthouse, where a team of addiction specialists waited to begin his outpatient treatment. The family gathering in the living room, Eleanor, Robert, Lily, James, and the medical professionals created a starkly different holiday scene than Victoria had envisioned when sending Eleanor to Paris. The road ahead won't be easy, the lead addiction counselor cautioned after outlining Robert's recovery program. Gambling addiction is particularly challenging, especially when it's been intertwined with psychological manipulation and chemical dependency. Robert sat straighter on the sofa, his expression more resolved than Eleanor had seen in years. I understand. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes. The counselor nodded, appreciating his commitment while recognizing the difficulties ahead. We'll begin with daily sessions, then transition to a stepped approach as you progress. The goal isn't just abstinence from gambling, but understanding the underlying vulnerabilities that made you susceptible to both the addiction and to Victoria's manipulation. After the medical team departed with arrangements for Robert's first session that afternoon, the family remained in the living room, the Christmas tree Eleanor had missed decorating, standing somewhat forlornly in the corner with hastily arranged ornaments Lily had put up. Not quite our usual holiday celebration, Lily observed, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. Eleanor surveyed the room, her son beginning the long journey of recovery, her granddaughter showing the strength and intelligence that promised a brilliant future, the evidence of Victoria's betrayal still visible in subtle ways throughout the space. Perhaps not, but possibly our most honest one. Robert looked up, meeting his mother's gaze directly for the first time since her return. Mom, I don't even know how to begin apologizing. What I allowed Victoria to do, what I participated in doing, is unforgivable. Eleanor considered her son thoughtfully. Forgiveness isn't a transaction, Robert. It's a process that begins with truth, continues with accountability, and requires sustained change. We've established the truth. You're beginning the accountability phase. Change will be demonstrated over time. Robert absorbed this wisdom with a slow nod. I want to earn back your trust. I know it won't happen quickly, but I need you to know that's my intention. Trust like forgiveness isn't given upon request, Eleanor replied, her tone gentle but firm. It's rebuilt through consistent action. Show me who you're becoming, not just who you regret being. Lily moved to sit beside her father, taking his hand. Grandma taught me something important when I was struggling in my first year of law school. She said better to fall and rise again than never to have stood at all. Robert looked at his daughter, then at his mother, seeing the lineage of strength that connected them, a lineage he had temporarily abandoned but could reclaim through difficult work. I'll remember that. Every day of recovery. The conversation was interrupted by James's arrival with breaking news. Victoria's attorney has approached the district attorney about a potential plea deal. She's offering to provide evidence against her gambling operation contacts in exchange for reduced charges. Eleanor processed this development with measured consideration. Her final attempt to manipulate the situation to her advantage. The DA is inclined to accept with conditions, James continued. She'd still serve substantial prison time for the fraud and attempted murder charges, but potentially less than she would if convicted at trial on all counts. Robert straightened, unexpected strength entering his voice. I want to testify regardless. Even if there's a plea deal, I want my victim impact statement on record. The world needs to know what she did and how she did it, so no one else falls victim to her methods. Eleanor studied her son, recognizing the emergence of the moral courage she and William had attempted to instill throughout his childhood. Are you prepared for what that means? Your gambling addiction, your participation in the fraud, your vulnerability to manipulation, all of it would become public record. Yes. Robert's response came without hesitation. My pride isn't worth someone else's safety. If my testimony helps even one person recognize the warning signs I missed, then it's worth any personal embarrassment. In that moment, Eleanor saw William in her son's features, not just the physical resemblance that had always been apparent, but the ethical backbone that had made her husband a truly worthy partner. The discovery sent a rush of emotion through her that she carefully contained behind her composed exterior. Very well. She nodded once, acknowledging his decision with the respect it deserved. James will inform the district attorney of your position. As James stepped away to make the call, Eleanor moved to the window overlooking Central Park, now transformed into a winter wonderland. The city stretched beyond millions of lives intersecting in complex patterns of relationship and consequence. Somewhere out there, other Victorias were targeting other vulnerable individuals. Other families were being manipulated, other assets being systematically stolen. What are you thinking about, Grandma? Lily joined her at the window, her young face reflected in the glass beside Eleanor's more weathered features. Eleanor considered the question carefully. I'm thinking about how invisible predators like Victoria remain to society. How easy it is to dismiss financial and emotional abuse, particularly when the victims are older or in vulnerable positions. Lily nodded her understanding. Because it doesn't leave physical scars. Precisely. Eleanor turned from the window to face her granddaughter directly. Perhaps that's the next chapter of the Blackwell legacy, creating legal protections and public awareness about these sophisticated forms of predation. Robert approached, tentatively joining the conversation. A foundation, perhaps educational programs for financial institutions, healthcare providers, family members, teaching them to recognize the warning signs. The suggestion hung in the air between them, a potential path toward redemption for Robert, meaningful work for Lily's budding legal career, and for Eleanor a final professional contribution that would transform their family trauma into protection for others. The Blackwell Foundation for Prevention of Elder Exploitation. Eleanor tested the words, finding them appropriate. We'll consult with James about the legal structure tomorrow. This simple exchange, the shared purpose emerging from their ordeal, created the first tentative bridge across the damage Victoria had inflicted. Not forgiveness yet, not complete healing, but the framework upon which both might eventually be built. As evening approached, the small family gathered around the dining table for a belated Christmas dinner prepared by Eleanor's longtime housekeeper. The traditional Blackwell holiday china gleamed under soft lighting, the familiar silver polished to a high shine, small normalcies reclaimed from the chaos of recent days. Eleanor raised her water glass, alcohol removed from the house as part of Robert's recovery protocol. To truth-faced lessons learned and futures reclaimed. Lily and Robert joined the toast, the crystal creating a clear, pure note as the glasses touched. Outside, snow began falling again, adding fresh white to the city's momentarily clean slate. Inside, 3 generations of Blackwells began the careful process of rebuilding what Victoria had nearly destroyed. 77 years have taught me that life's greatest challenges often reveal our hidden strengths, Eleanor reflected as they began their meal. Victoria thought age had weakened me, that silver hair signaled vulnerability, that wrinkles meant yielding. She failed to understand that every line on my face marks a battle won, every silver strand represents wisdom earned. She mistook my most powerful weapons for weaknesses, and that is why ultimately she lost. Robert looked at his mother with new eyes, seeing not just the elegant woman who had raised him, but the formidable strategist who had protected him even when he had betrayed her trust. I never truly understood your strength until now, Mom. I'm sorry it took something like this to make me see it. Eleanor met her son's gaze steadily. Better late than never, Robert. Better late than never.